What do these changes mean when you're building and evolving or evolving your business to run on AWS as a managed service provider? Number one, you need a comprehensive understanding of AWS services and features. Number two, it's going to take a resetting of roles. The functions, the processes, and all the support that goes into running an MSP are moving towards a DevOps approach both for the MSP as a customer and for your customers as well. And DevOps may mean different things to different people, and it may not resonate with you functionally in this standpoint, but based on the way that we approach these things, the more agile approaches that kind of roll into a DevOps mentality, absolutely necessary to continue to be successful in this area. And new financial models and contracts. Like I said, as a customer, I don't care if I have 1 server online or 100 servers online. If you're charging me by the server, though, then I would start to care. But functionally, I just want my email to work. So a view from AWS MSPs. I'm lucky enough to have with us a few partners. We audited our first round of AWS MSP partners. They've gone through the validation. We announced 6 on the 23rd of March this year. Smartronix, Cascadio, RightBrain, SecondWatch, DataPipe, and Day One Solutions all went through our audit process, and that process is available on the website. It's open for everyone to see what's required to go through that. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more with 2 of our special guests. From RightBrain Networks, we have Jamie Began, who's going to be joining us up here, as well as Spencer Colson from Smartronix. And both these gentlemen work very actively and currently in the AWS MSP space, very familiar with cloud technologies and use them on a day-to-day basis, help enable their customers in an effective manner, and have gone through the audit process, which we're hoping wasn't too grueling and terrible, but we'll dig into that a little bit more as this progresses. So you guys are welcome to take a seat or stand or whatever works for you.
Thank you.
Make yourself comfortable. We appreciate you coming out for us today. So the first piece on the list, comprehensive understanding of AWS services and features. Should not be a surprise to anyone in this room, especially if you made it to our keynote this morning or have used AWS before. A quick show of hands in here, who has used AWS services directly? Excellent. Who has heard of AWS services? And who does not like to raise their hands in a social setting? Excellent. Just want to get a good feel here. So as most of you are aware, we have a very large selection of services. And within those services, there's an even larger selection of features and sub-features that can build very complex or very simple applications and solve very complex or very simple problems depending on what it is you're trying to do. And those features and those services keep evolving constantly, daily. Last year, we had 470 feature and service releases over the course of the year. That's more than 1 a day. Not 1 per work day. That's more than 1 per day last year. It's a staggering pace to try to keep up with. And there's no expectation that you are a 100% incredible depth expert on all of those services at a managed service provider. We do, however, expect that from a subset, and this is taken directly from our audit document, you will be an expert in these pieces because they are so core and so vital to the platform. Things like EC2 and EBS. If you don't completely understand our compute platform and our storage platform, I don't believe you can effectively serve a customer as their managed service provider. It's not exactly the way it was. The concepts have shifted. It's not managing a box in a rack. You need to understand these things a little more deeply, and the audit process goes through to validate that you know those things. Additionally, there's some advanced functionality and advanced features that can be enabled by combining some of these services and gives you the ability to create workloads and create solutions that maybe you couldn't previously. And actually, here's a question for you guys. As you're reaching out into the cloud and expanding the reach of your customer, expanding the reach of your company and helping your customers do more, do bigger, do better. Do you guys have any examples of workloads that maybe your customers weren't able to achieve before that have been kind of turned on or amped up or enabled by AWS and cloud technologies?
The first one that comes to mind is a customer that we had back in 2008, 2009, back in the early days. They came to us and said, we need a website up in 10 weeks. We don't have a website, we don't have a product, we don't have a process, and by the way, it's going to need to ingest just random input forms in Excel, and it's going to need to present this information back to the general public. So full public consumption and full public ingest. And it was an open bid from the government, and they said, okay, let's see who can do this. Out of the open bid, only 2 people responded, 2 companies responded, and we came back with saying, we can only do this with Amazon. This isn't possible unless we use Amazon for this. We were lucky enough to get awarded that bid, and 10 weeks later, we turned on recovery.gov to track all of the TARP spending for for the government, and it seems to have been a pretty good success. And it was really only possible because we had the capability of AWS.
That's fantastic. Jamie, do you have any examples of maybe areas you've been able to help your customers innovate more aggressively through the use of the cloud?
Yeah, a good number of our customers are startups. A lot of them actually here in San Francisco, and it's a team of developers, and they need to be 100% focused on value add, building their product. And they don't really have the time, or perhaps not even the interest in kind of taking care of the underlying plumbing of their systems. So they're just full throttle ahead trying to build out their application. Some of them gearing up to a launch, some of them haven't even launched yet. So that's what we can actually come in and do, and we take care of everything for that. We'll actually help them work with their developers to make sure that they're building services appropriately to consume AWS, and then once they actually do hit that launch day, that their applications are going to function as expected, and as their business grows, their infrastructure grows with them.
Great. And it sounds like, I know in my day-to-day job, I work with a lot of companies that have very specific preconceived notions about how technology works and how servers work and how these workloads are supposed to function. In both of your experience, are there any kinds of suggestions or things you can point out for initial conversations when you're talking with customers around maybe red flags that they need a little more education before you start moving into the design phase?
Yeah, I'll take a shot at that. So a lot of the times we'll go into these boardrooms where we're discussing, hey, can we adopt cloud? What is this going to mean from us? And inevitably somebody in the boardroom, as we're working with these enterprises, will say, well, everything's virtualized in VMware already. We're just going to take that and put that in the cloud. And that often is a quick trigger for me to say, we've got some real education to do, because it's not just about taking a VM and dropping it in that space. It's about how do we get value from the cloud much more in advance of being able to just do infrastructure as a service.
Mm-hmm. And same kind of build off what Spencer says. Kind of one of our taglines that we use is managed servers, or managed services, not managed servers. It's not simply VMs owned by somebody else. It's an entire suite of products and services that could really help you accelerate your business and make your application a lot more interesting to work with and to kind of build on. Another kind of phrase is infrastructure as a code. So, a product that we rely on pretty heavily is CloudFormation, which allows you to kind of just define your entire infrastructure in one big text file or multiple text files, hit go, and then 20 minutes later you have your entire infrastructure stood up. And then you can take that same CloudFormation template and launch it in a different region for DR, or possibly to reduce latency. And it's just a completely different way of thinking if all you're concerned about is doing what you would normally do at a terminal, you're just doing it and computers owned by somebody else. It's a very different mindset.
Great. So the second piece on there, on our list, is kind of a reset of roles, functions, and processes to support one of the big industry buzzwords, DevOps, which means different things to different people. It kind of ties in with the agile methodologies and the functions of pushing more code out the door, pushing it out more quickly, also pushing it out at a high quality, or enough quality that you can release it much more effectively to production. I have an enterprise background. Prior to coming to AWS, I was working for a very large corporation, and the concept of pushing out code faster, I fought back on that. I'm going to be completely honest. It made me a little uncomfortable, letting people in the environment a little quicker. And I'm curious, actually, I know Smartronics has a very large presence in both enterprise and federal space. What kind of things do you hear from customers around DevOps in the enterprise?
So that's a pretty interesting conversation. That often starts out with the conversation of people asking us, so what do we need to do different with our employees? So we're in the cloud now. How do I get my employees to be effective in the cloud? Because in these enterprise spaces, they often have a lot invested in people. And so we find that it's much easier to do a conversion of tools than it is to convert people and processes within these organizations. So we'll start out by saying, okay, let's focus on the things that we can do, the DevOps principles or the AWS cloud principles that we can do in the existing tool and people sets. Maybe we augment it with some cloud tools like you mentioned, CloudFormation, or creating AMIs, those sorts of things we'll augment it with. But how can we leverage those people to start introducing some of those processes? And we'll develop CloudFormation templates or autoscaling groups with just one machine in it to do a restart on a machine that needs to come back online to ensure availability. We'll create AMIs of machines and make sure those are in place as part of our disaster recovery or instantaneous recovery models. And we'll work with them on how do we make sure that we can reconstitute an environment in the case that a machine fails. We don't want to spend all of our time focusing on that machine, even if it is a critical Oracle Business Objects machine, which may take months to actually configure and get it to the way it needs to be.
Right.
How do we make that machine so that we can get it back quickly in the case of a failure of a previous machine? So we'll start in those spaces, and then we'll work with them up the stack, oftentimes spending a lot of time on organizational transformations. How do we get our people and processes in place? Because the technology tends, in this case, to be really the easy part of it.
Right. That's actually brings up an interesting duality. Jamie, you work very aggressively with startups. You've got a very good track record of stepping in and helping newer companies kind of move into a more effective managed state and helping them move their services into a more manageable fashion. When you have a startup and there's 3 guys in a garage, they usually choose the language they know, the tools they know. They build it as quickly as they can to get their minimum viable product out the door. It ramps up to 1 million users, hopefully overnight. When you step into a situation like that, and you've got who knows how many languages and who knows what architecture underneath, how do you start working with them to drive towards process as opposed to out of the wild, wild west of whatever I know is going to go?
Sure. So this is probably one of our key competitive advantages is that I'm almost equally staffed here of both software engineers and your traditional operations engineers. So we know how to get in there and actually tell them, this isn't going to work on EC2. You're storing your sessions on servers that are going to be disappearing every hour. Not a good idea. So we actually can help them re-architect and in some cases completely rewrite portions of their application. It isn't simply just taking an app and kind of throwing it over the wall, which you would traditionally find in an MSP. So it's absolutely essential to be a successful MSP in the cloud that you actually understand what it means to write applications that are designed to run on AWS. You just can't do the lift and shift and expect to get the full advantages of AWS.
Excellent. That's great insight there. It's one of the challenges that I struggle with personally. And the partner tier that I support, often we get a lot of startups, and a lot of times they're directly saying, we built this thing, it's great, and it's kind of stopped scaling, and now we've got 1 million users, and we're going on Good Morning America tomorrow. Like, that's going to be a challenge. But hopefully you've got we can recommend a good MSP that can step in there and say, all right, here's how we do damage control, here's how we get things straightened up, and it's great to hear that you guys are putting the customers first in that area.
I don't know how many engagements we've had where that's been exactly the case. Is these teams do an amazing job. Amazon users do an amazing job of creating amazing products. And it's just so amazing to see what everybody is doing, creating, and the value they're adding by the intellectual property that they're developing on top of AWS. And these creative geniuses that are creating these products oftentimes don't have that same background of making sure that the product is long-term viable as far as an operations perspective. And so we've had a lot of engagements where people will reach out to us and say, we've got this great product, but it crashed, or it went down, or we have this major outage. How do we make sure that we prevent this from happening again? And can you help us own that part of the relationship? And I think that's where a really good MSP can come in, and even though there is some backtracking to be done, help those teams to be able to understand what it means and lift that activity away from their burden so that they can use their creative genius to create the value that they make.
Yeah, that's a fantastic approach, trying to help them get themselves out of their own way so they can take advantage of the agility of the cloud and get their ideas out there and keep them moving.
Absolutely.
And that kind of plays well into the other item that we had up on the board of specialization. So there's an understanding that with an MSP, there are certain things you are going to be able to do. There are core competencies. You're going to know how to manage a server. You're going to know how to manage 10 servers. You're going to know how to handle a release cycle. You're going to know how to manage a code base. To kind of differentiate yourself, there's a need to step up. There's a need to kind of move out of the way of the traditional and just the regular and the vanilla, if you will, to kind of make a name for yourself in the industry and in that area. Through our program, we've given the opportunity to do some advanced validations, which aren't currently being produced in the environment, but we've got some on the roadmap that we've released openly to help your companies kind of stand out a little bit and be the go-to person for X in the industry, whatever that happens to be. We've got a few things that we've identified as big value props or big things that we get asked for regularly in this space. And I'm curious, actually, from both of your perspectives, what is the unique thing that customers come to you for, or that you're hoping that customers are identifying that you are the specialist in that they're coming to you for?
I'll let you brag first.
Sure. Now, I think this is a really good point. I'm glad this slide's here because this kind of goes back to what I said where you have to understand the application to be successful at MSP on AWS. This slide may not be applicable if you're simply doing data center MSP work because it's server as a server, OS is an OS. But to understand, top down what the application's doing, you have to specialize. And our specialization is SaaS products. Products that are built, multi-tenant environments, so you've got increased security concerns. They certainly have additional scalability and availability concerns rather than just your single tenant, typically on-prem type installed application. So, focus is what you say no to. And what we say no to are things that like a SharePoint or Exchange or your typical back office products, which is very common in MSP. Perhaps Spencer might be a better partner for that, or perhaps somebody else in the ecosystem would be better. We focus only on these SaaS applications and things that just have to scale and have quantifiable downtime, which sometimes includes e-commerce too, but typically SaaS.
Yeah, I liked what you said about focus is what you say no to. That's kind of a cool way to approach it. Smartronics, one of the things that we came up in the Department of Defense federal space, and so you really take what you know when you come to this environment, and I think that's really important because I'm going to imagine that not everybody here wants to become an MSP, a commercial MSP, but you want to figure out how to provide MSP internal. So how do I, as an enterprise or as an organization, serve my own internal customers effectively and be able to help my business grow as a user on the cloud? So we sort of took that same approach and said, what do we do well from our previous DNA? And how do we leverage that as a differentiator in this MSP space? And for Smartronics, that was our Department of Defense and federal market. We're very comfortable with standing up secure environments and helping people get validated. And so we took the approach of making a FedRAMP certified managed service provider service. And so we're in the process of upgrading our MSP to FedRAMP v4 for whoever cares about those terms. But for those people who do, now they can come to us and they know that Amazon is FedRAMP certified and Smartronics is as well. So now they can get that whole service layer to meet their government mandates straight through us as a provider. And I imagine that many of you out there have similar DNA backgrounds where maybe you do HIPAA workloads or maybe you have a PCI compliance angle, or maybe you are heavy in the enterprise, and you can take that nugget of previous experience and make that as a natural springboard into those customers for which you provide managed services. And for those of you who are enterprises, maybe that springboard is, I know my company really well. I know who I work for, and so I'm going to leverage that knowledge as the foundation for providing managed services as a special competency to my organization.
Excellent. Yeah, as the core competency becomes more commoditized and you can figure out the best practices for monitoring and managing, and these are fairly well documented concepts, you're absolutely right that leaning on what you know, what you're good at, what drives you as a company, you start to stand out and you get the case studies in place. And when salespeople ask, hey, I need somebody for this specific workload, there becomes an obvious choice, and it becomes market leaders in particular areas, not because they're really good at patching servers and they're really good at keeping things functioning and online and hitting their SLAs, but because they're really good in the federal space, or they're really good at driving DevOps in some sort of form and structure in companies that previously had no form or structure. Yeah. And really managing, whether it's migrating applications, you could be great at mobile, you could be great at specifically online gaming that focuses on social media. Whatever your niche is, there's a play for it. There's somebody else that's trying to do that well, and someone that you can help improve their overall AWS and cloud and their business.
And one of the reasons we like co-presenting here is because we do SharePoint and Exchange really well. So if you got that working,
synergies in place.
Right. Yeah. This is a good relationship here.
Yeah. So the next piece, the super fun and exciting part, let's talk about some contracts and some new financial models. So as these things are changing, as the landscape and requirements and expectations for what makes a good MSP and what makes an effective cloud MSP changes, you take a look at the existing model and the existing concept of when you're going to turn on an MSP, when you're going to engage an MSP. And usually, as someone who's done this from the enterprise side, we would go through the development process, we'd go through the build process, we'd have the outsourced developers create it, we'd get the app done and working the way marketing wants it, and then hand it off to the MSP to run it. That doesn't work so well anymore. And I can definitely let you guys elaborate on what that looks like in your specific spaces, but if you don't start engaging a little bit earlier and knowing when to engage and how to engage, you're going to set yourself up for a painful conversation at the end because you have the same challenge. So I'm curious, two things. Number one, how has your engagement model shifted, if it has, when you're moving to a cloud from the Smartronics side? And do your contracts still look the same? Are people still asking the same questions? We're driving towards new types of SLAs. Are you getting traction in that area?
Good, I appreciate that. So we've been doing delivery models in the cloud for quite a few years, well, at least in cloud terms, quite a few years. And some of the initial ones, they just wanted, our contracts just wanted us to build things for them. And then they were going to take it over and do the magic after we build and deployed. And then the customer quickly had some issues on operationalizing or lack of operationalizing. And we had the opportunity on those initial engagements to come back and, hey, okay, let's figure this out and let's get this together. And it was a quick lesson for us to realize that in this cloud model, we've got to engage the conversation of operationalizing super early. And whether we're doing the operations or whether they are, we've got to have that front loaded. And oftentimes, we even build that conversation as a deliverable and conversation item right into the very, very first statement of work that we deliver to a customer. So that right up front, we bring that flag of planning for operations at the front load side. I think your second question was about making traction with contracts. Mm-hmm. And that's a really, really good point. I don't know how many people here deal with enterprises or are in an enterprise. The enterprise teams love the space because there's so many great opportunities to help and transform that environment dramatically. What can be sometimes difficult in that space is introducing new terms and new philosophies, not because there isn't adoption to it, but because of the amount of layers of information flow that needs to happen. You have to educate and engage all the way up from the IT staff as you climb through contracts, as you go through the C teams, so on and so forth. As you're progressing through the organization, anytime you introduce a change to the way the contract's written, from the way they're used to seeing it, the technology, the delivery model, the SLAs, that has to be retaught. So if you're planning major transformation in the way that you're doing MSP delivery, you have to plan that into your schedule, that I'm going to be engaging and educating over and over again as I go through this process. Okay? Yeah. One of the things that we found helps short-circuit that a little bit is even if you're delivering massively different types of delivery models to the technical teams, if you can keep, for those customers where you expect the issue, your contracts to read similar to the old models, not hiding anything by any means, all that's super clear and documented, but the terminology-wise, delivery description-wise, it helps the process run a lot more smoothly through the approval cycles, through the review cycles.
That's a good tip.
So.
Curious from the right brain side, you guys are a born in the cloud company. You focus on more agile, more already in place kind of cloud accepting type companies. What do your contracts look like coming at it fresh? Do you honor an SLA model, or what does that even sound
so like? I'm looking at kind of the diagram here, and it'll be a couple times a week I'll actually get a phone call from somebody saying, "I've got X number of servers. How much is it going to cost me per month to have you guys manage it?" And we really got to kind of backtrack the discussion and kind of talk about kind of what it means to do this kind of work in the cloud. So that there's almost always, in fact, there is always this kind of cloud enablement, cloud optimization project that we have to do, which generally can last a few weeks, in which we take their code and work with their development team and help them kind of rebuild their application, kind of work in this auto-scaling, self-healing environment. We have to do that because we have to bake in a lot of this automation to be able to provide them with the SLA. And again, we're not working with commercial off-the-shelf software like SharePoint, so I'm not really going to, I don't know how we could actually provide an SLA around kind of the uptime of that particular application. We're working with a lot of bespoke written applications written by our customers. Conceivably, they could actually push code and kind of break their own infrastructure. So who's responsible for that? Do I take on that onus to actually get it up and running, and do I page my guys in the middle of the night to go and fix something, or do I push that back on the customer and tell them that they have to fix it, and then it just results in a bad customer experience? Mm-hmm. So this kind of tailors into the whole contract. We've been doing this kind of work for about 2 years now, and I've gone through, I think, 3 or 4 different iterations of our agreement as we've kind of refined this. How do we actually delineate who's responsible for what and make sure that's clearly communicated with the customer? So to kind of give you a short answer to your question, our SLAs are based around if you were to hit that panic button, somebody's going to be fixing your problem within 30 minutes. And that's kind of the SLAs that I have. I don't actually guarantee the uptime of your application because I'm not the one who's ultimately responsible for writing it.
Right. That's interesting, the shift there, that there's still, obviously there's expectations to be had by the customer, and there's responses to be made, and it's definitely interesting to see that shift to how soon we'll address what you perceive as an issue versus how long the server will be online and available.
It's an ongoing thing. I mean,
Yeah.
we continue to refine it.
So part of the process with the AWS MSP program is our validation checklist and the audit that you have to go through to get the badge and to join the program. A few of the items in there are specifically tailored towards driving down customer cost. And there's also the challenge of AWS constantly dropping prices and customers being well aware that your margins just got better and you're doing a little bit better business now because there's fewer costs on the server side and on the infrastructure side. Big question comes down to, with all of those things happening, how do you continue to make money as an MSP in the cloud? Like, traditional models are getting a little scary.
Sure. Well, I'm not making money off AWS spend. That's kind of a traditional MSP model where you kind of have like this flat monthly spend, and if you get more efficient, that's where your margins are. I mean, there's somewhat to that extent, but if I get more efficient, generally that's enabling my customer to succeed. And where we make most of our money is just in the professional services and kind of moving forward and kind of helping them automate their application and kind of doing that kind of work. So when they save money, it benefits everybody. I mean, it's just a different way of thinking about things where, Amazon is very much customer focused. They want the customer to win. They want the customers to spend as few dollars as possible. As an MSP, I have to have that same alignment. And I think it's for the customer's benefit.
Yeah, I think that's kind of interesting what you said there is, as an MSP, we have to have our customer's best interest in mind. So I think as an MSP, whether we're a commercial MSP or providing our own enterprise internal organizational support, the cloud model has changed things a little bit. Amazon's like the first company that I worked with where they want you to spend less per thing, okay? They want you to drive down your cost on your delivery of X application. They want you to be as efficient as possible with that, and largely because that enables you to do more. Once you drive down the cost of that thing, you can do more. You can do other things. You can promote your business more. You can drive additional innovation. And as an MSP, if we're not mirroring that, then we're not going to be in that space. We've really got to drive forward with our customers to help them to drive down their cost, even if it's driving down our costs as well, because that will in turn enable them to reinvest. There's so much need for the customers that we support under MSP to generate and to transform that we've seen zero risk in helping a customer to drive down cost, because that cost always comes right back. They're doing your next project, they're doing your next delivery. And so as an MSP, we've really got to be aware of that and driving towards the most innovation that we can deliver through customers.
Yep. And I'm completely comfortable with having to earn my customer's business.
Absolutely.
Like that. Yeah, I mean, I'm completely aligned with AWS, and it sounds like you are as well. So.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, if we're not driving value back to our customers, then we're not enabling them to make that next big step.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
And that's where we all succeed, is when they make that next big step.
Yep. And it's great to hear that you guys are focusing on driving forward for the customer and really engaging aggressively in that area. It's very much in line with our company philosophy.
Yep.
But big question here, you guys are doing a lot of work. What is AWS doing to enable MSPs? How are we helping? The one area, which I will point out as the AWS representative here, we have a very diverse platform. We have a lot of services, we have a lot of features, we have a lot of options. There's a few core pieces that were pointed out earlier that you have to know and you have to be good at to be eligible to be a managed service provider on AWS with a certified approach. We've got lots of higher level services around document management, we've got application streaming, we've got big data services, may or may not be applicable to every customer. Question I have for you from a platform perspective, what do you guys see as the biggest value to an MSP as a company as opposed to services that you're offering out to your customers from a platform perspective?
I think you have some cooler stuff, so I'll start with the basic stuff. So we've found that there's a certain level of Amazon capabilities that is just tit for tat required in order to do MSP. And It's those things like being able to take a snapshot, and being able to effectively automate and deliver that backup process, okay? How do I effectively back up a Windows machine different than a Linux machine? Having that knowledge and capability. Being able to use CloudWatch, monitoring the system health, absolutely just fundamental. Being able to use CloudFormation. How do I get my systems back online when they fail? I can't afford to be the keeper of all the knowledge about that individual system, so I document that through CloudFormation or some similar format. So these are sort of the foundational tools that you guys just have to have in place in order to be efficient as a cloud MSP. Above that level is when things start to get interesting and sort of cloud sexy, is when we get into the tools that really enable more DevOps. And those tools, when we start to enable and embrace them, are where we as an MSP start to become efficient, where we can scale with having fewer number of people to more number of servers, when we start to implement things like OpsWorks. So we can lay systems down by code and be able to not just do it for one customer, but for 20 or 30 customers, because they may have similar baseline requirements. Being able to help the customer with code deploy so that they aren't breaking things as often. Because if we can avoid them breaking things, then we don't have to come back and fix them. So any of those things that we can do to help mature the life cycle through those more advanced DevOps principles will decrease the per server support requirement and give us an opportunity to either increase revenue or to be able to drive deeper density of people to servers. What's been your experience?
Yeah, I mean, same thing. It's getting out of the mindset of servers and looking at services. So it's knowing what problem the customer's trying to solve, which service makes sense. We have so much integration with kind of the way we do things. Like, for instance, if you were changing a security group, that information gets written into CloudTrail to an S3 bucket, and we've got a Lambda function that picks it up, looks for interesting security events, and then opens a ticket. It's within about 2 minutes of it happening. So it's things like that. We actually have, we have our SNS, which is Simple Notification Service. We have those alerts wired into people's code. So our customer's code is actually instrumented to work with our help desk ticketing system. And we, back to the whole CloudFormation, the whole infrastructure is code. Everything that we do is done in CloudFormation. We don't do anything via the API or the management console. And we actually have our CloudFormation templates are stuck in Git using GitFS. So we can version infrastructure. So we can version our infrastructure, we can version code, and we have database snapshots, or we can roll back transaction log. Those are the three things I need to do, and I can hit an undo button at any point in time for any of our customers' application. That's extremely powerful to do, especially in a DR scenario. And it's just understanding the AWS tools that allows you to do this kind of stuff, and then spending the time to get smarter on those, and then figure out how to use those to actually solve real problems.
That's great to hear from a tooling perspective. A lot of those primitives map, sounds like, fairly well into the type of things that you're managing. It's a lot of the challenges that, as companies, individuals are having as well, which is why those tools exist. Snapshotting is one of my favorites. The ability to go oops and go back one, be able to programmatically approach those things and not manage huge libraries of tapes and huge additional storage systems. Simplification that definitely rings true. Quick show of hands. Who loves audits? No? Come on.
You must be an auditor.
So, with the revamp and the relaunch of our managed service provider program, we've spun up an audit component. And I'm not a huge fan of audits as a user of said things. They're a bit painful. They take a lot of time. They take a lot of documentation. We took that into account when we built this program. The expectation of our audit is to make sure that the customer is going to a safe place where the provider who's going to be taking care of them will treat them the way that we would expect them to be treated. We'll take care of their data in a reasonable way. We'll take care of their security in a reasonable way. We'll do things to continue to drive towards an Amazon experience, even though it's not Amazon twisting the knobs and turning the keys and handling that relationship directly. The validation checklist is available on the website. You can go and take a look at what's expected. There's a self-assessment that you can do as well to see where you fare. One of the goals with this was to use it as a combined document, not only to show it as a list of controls that need to be in place and validated and documented every year to identify these are the things you have to do to be certified, but also to identify areas where companies may have gaps or may have areas where they didn't realize that they could or should improve, kind of as a practice building doc, where I can do 8 of these things today, and these other 2 things totally make sense, and maybe we should build towards that. From a functional standpoint, both of your companies have now been audited and validated, and you went through that super exciting and fun process. I'm curious from a feedback perspective, what was that like? What should other expecting MSPs look for going into that?
Sure. So yeah, it was about as fun as I was expecting it would be. I mean, wasn't going into there expecting a good time. But yeah, it was basically me sitting across the table from 3 auditors for over 6 hours, and they even made me work through lunch. So it definitely was not fun, but it was well worth it. Even this checklist, super helpful. It causes us to kind of really get focused on what would enable success, and and it gives a framework to to double check that we're doing things correctly. Is just kind of and then it would apply self validation checklist. It was kind of cool to kind of go through and say, yeah, we've been doing that. It's good to know we're doing this right. Oh, maybe here's some room for improvement. And there were a few of those as well. I mean, I didn't score 100% on the thing, and it's allowed me to improve my business and get better at serving customers. It was very fairly administered. I thought it was very professional. It was exactly what I was expecting, and I've been really excited at this program for a while because it really gives us a clear differentiator when we're talking to customers. And I do regularly share this checklist with customers, saying, hey, this is exactly what we're doing and how we're doing it. And Amazon, via a third party, says that we're doing it correctly.
Great.
The thing I like about this is we're in an interesting place where sometimes we're hired to help organizations become their own internal MSPs, where we'll help them go through the process of how do I operationalize my cloud, even though they're going to run it themselves. But what does it mean to operationalize it and be an effective internal MSP? In addition to doing MSP for customers directly, sometimes we help these organizations to become their own for their own internal services. And what I like about this is that it gives us a good way as an organization to sort of chart the things we need to do in order to be effective at delivering services in the cloud. So not only is it a good way to prepare for the audit or to prepare to be validated that we can do an effective job in AWS, but it's also a good way for us to see how we're doing against best practices as an organization as a whole. And I really like the value Amazon's put into helping us to improve the way that we work with Amazon as organizations, whether we're commercial or not.
It's great feedback. So the other thing that Amazon is doing here to help MSPs is our managed service program. There are actual benefits that go along with going through these processes and jumping through these hoops. There's expectations around APN membership. There's an expectation around revenue to be eligible for the program. There's an expectation around certification. You need a certain number of certified staff members, both in the standard level, and there's extra points during the validation if you have professional level certifications as well. There's training expectations, and there's also the validation review, so the audit that you need to go through. Assuming that you go through all those hurdles, and they're not designed to be painful, they're not designed to be harsh on you, they're just designed to be in place so that we're comfortable with customers coming to you and saying, I need help, and you being able to say confidently, yes, I will be able to help you as a business, I will be able to help you achieve your goals because I know what I'm doing and I've done it before, and here's how we're going to move forward. Once you've gone through those, there are business benefits. There are credits available for development efforts. There's credits that we can issue for proof of concept that you'll be eligible for. There's fast track funding options as well. There's additional program offerings that open up as you move through the AWS or the APN tiers, our partner network. And there's also the access to exclusive webinars and additional content that's not available to every customer off the street. There's marketing benefits. You get a logo, a special logo that goes with just the certified partners in the MSP program. There's the opportunity to co-present at industry events, which they're taking advantage of right here, right now, which is we are grateful for, and I'm sure they're enjoying as well. You're eligible for marketing funds and programs and additional campaigns that other people are not because they're not members of the program. And placements in the partner directory as a managed service provider, which is a big ask from customers around the cloud space in general. I don't necessarily know what I'm doing in the cloud. I need someone to help. Managed service providers are our go-to for the broad understanding of the portfolio and the system and the way to get customers up and moving. Being listed and having that logo available gives the customers the confidence that this is a solid decision because I know that they've been validated and checked and they're going to know how to approach this problem. Enablement side, we also have opportunities for you to participate in workshops that are not generally available to the public, both ProServe and additional training workshops that we do with our higher tier partners. You get access to the best practices guides. So within the APN, there's a landing area that has additional information and content tailored and targeted to MSPs. You also get reduced cost for some of the boot camps and some of the certification programs. We have different internal options just from a functional perspective that make it a little bit easier to exist and to grow and to run in the ecosystem from a financial outlay perspective. And I'm curious with you guys here, with the benefits of the program. I know that you're taking advantage of one of these items that's on the list here, and there's others that are described in the program documentation that aren't necessarily as clear. What is the biggest benefit to you in general for this program? What is it that makes you want to come out here and talk about it today?
I think for us, it's just knowing that we can speak with Amazon and with Amazon's customers with a level of trust. And we know that when we say we're an MSP provider, we're not saying it, but we actually have that validation. This is something that's real. Hand in hand with that, it allows us to be able to work with the sales team, and they in turn know that we're real, and that we're going to take care of their customers and help them to grow. And that's been really valuable for us to be able to, as we team with the Amazon teams that we're going out and capturing new opportunities, to be able to ensure that we engender that trust both between the organizations, because we have this contract now, but also externally to the customers.
Yep. Same answer, essentially. There are a lot of traditional MSPs that will join the APN to get that Amazon logo on their line card, just simply because they have to say that they're in cloud because that's what their customers expect. This is taking it to the next level. It's showing us, giving us tools to enable our business, to enable our customers to succeed on AWS and in managed services. And I've been very happy with the program, and I'm glad to see it come to fruition.
That's great to hear. So how can you get started today? I'm hoping that after hearing this discussion, hearing from people that are successfully doing cloud managed services, seeing the benefits of the program and seeing what's kind of going on in this space, number one, I hope you're a member of the Amazon Partner Network. There are great benefits to the program. At the initial registration, there is no cost. You can go to the website, the aws.amazon.com, and you can find the partner program link. And you can sign up right now if you are not currently an Amazon partner to become a partner and join the program. There are lots of features and benefits. Whether you feel the MSP program is the right fit for you or not, we have various other programs and opportunities to help accelerate our partners' businesses into the cloud and help them succeed in this space. If you are specifically interested in the Managed Services Provider program, which I hope that you are, there's a link here, and these slides will be available on SlideShare, I believe, after the presentation, so don't necessarily worry about jotting that down too quickly. And then also the AWS Training and Certification Center. And there's two reasons for that. It's required to move up the tiers in the APN membership, as well as to get eligibility for this program, to have a certain number of certifications. But it's also essential to keep on top of your training. As you saw, there's lots and lots of services that we offer. And the next one that we release, and it may have been one of the ones we released today, maybe that's going to be the next big thing for your customer. And you need to know where to go to get the right information, the right training, the right certifications in place to say to your customer confidently, we know how to do this, and to also be able to effectively deliver it. So highly, highly recommend checking out the Training and Certification Center. Whether you're interested in this program or not, or if it's a different program, it's of immense value. We've got great on-site programs, we've got boot camps, we've got self-paced things, we've got videos you can use, we've got certification programs that you can do locally in your different geographic areas that you can go for the testing. They're all proctored exams. Lots of information, lots of opportunities to build the skill sets that you need to run a managed service provider business or any business in the cloud. And that brings us to the end. Thank you all very much for making the time to come out. Thank you, gentlemen, very much for sharing some information here with the group.
Sure.
It's very useful. And if you guys have any questions, we'll be hanging around in the back of the room and more than happy to talk. Thank you all.